Okay, been meaning to do this for a while because it's difficult to try to explain this on Facebook posts or even a written document. It's going to be how to set up Simplify 3D to slice, let's see, let's start with a two-color model with no purging for the A10M or A20M. There's other ways to do it, but for the purposes of this video, I want to show you how to set up a file with two separate STLs to print two colors. First thing we want to do is going to be to start a profile. As I said, we're just going to do dual colors, two colors. You do have the dual extrusion wizard, but don't use it. you can, but this will help you learn better how to set up extra extruders, and when you do mixed colors and you have 3, 4, 5 different extruders here, you'll know how to go about it. So you see I already have a left extruder. We need another one. I call it right. You can name these whatever you want. Doesn't really matter. Go back here. You see left. I'm going to always associate the left tool head with tool 0. Important step there. And then we click on right. I want to change that to tool 1. Those coincide with A10M, A20M, E0, and E1. So let's set these up first thing. We already have our left extruder set for tool 0, nozzle diameter 0.4, extrusion 0.1. I always use extrusion width auto. It's going to set it to 0.48. You can set this to whatever you desire, but I always go with an extrusion width that's more than my nozzle diameter. Retraction for my machine, I know 5 millimeters works good. I never use an extra restart distance, and I never use Z-hop or vertical lift. Retraction speed seems to work good for me at 45 millimeters per second, and for this we'll leave coasted end in. That'll help when it comes to the end of a line and a layer to not get so much of a blob. We want to make the settings the same here on the right extruder. 0.4, 1, auto, 5, 45, coasted end 0.2. Okay, so now our two extruders are set up and associated with the correct tools. And the reason we want to go through and we want to set this profile up before we add any STLs, before we add any other processes. And the reason being is when you go to add these processes, if you add a bunch of processes first, then you go to set up all these settings, you're going to have to do all these settings for every process. So I always do one thing at a time, set up the profile first, then we'll add STLs and processes. Okay, layer, we don't need to worry about this just yet, but we can set up some of it. We use primary layer height, 0.2, 4 solid tops, 4 solid bottoms, and then 2 outside perimeters, print inside out. My first layer height, I don't go with 0.3, I go with anything over 0.2. 0.2 to 0.25 is usually fine, and just a little extra width. Optimize start points, different places. You're going to want, sometimes you're going to want your Z seam or your start layers to always be in the same place, so you can choose that. And it doesn't have to be an exact thing. Let's say you want the seam to always be on the very front of the model, facing you. So you'd put in an X value of say 117.5, and Y of close to 0, could be 10. Every once in a while, hit your update profile just so you're saving what you're doing. Additions, skirt, offset from part, that means it's actually going to be a brim right up next to your part. And most of the time you really don't need much. Just to, I use some even if I don't need it, just to prime the extruder a little bit so it'll start printing well. We're not going to need a prime pillar for this or an ooze shield because we're just going to do a simple switch with no purging or anything. Infill, you don't need to set a percentage. The model we're going to do today, I'm just going to guess that we're going to want 15%. We're going to go ahead and set this up so we don't have to come back and do it later. Supports, no supports. Temperatures, you want to make sure that your temperatures are always set to T0. You'll notice it's T0 for the bed and for the hot end heater. That's okay. You want to always leave those to 0, otherwise it's not going to work. It's going to try to heat an extruder that doesn't exist. Cooling, I usually step up my fan a few layers at a time. Set those however you want. G-code, okay, now this is how we set up the printer. These check boxes are about the only ones you want checked here. There, there, there. No offsets. For a Cartesian printer. Build volume for the A10M, 235, 235, 260. I think the A20M is, 255, so you'd set that for A20M. These are pretty much, all the rest of this is all default values. These settings here, the build volume is the only setting we really need to change on this page. Scripts, as you can see, I'm minimalist. Home, that's all I need. Don't care about anything else at this point, but we will use this maybe in another video for when we do mixes and set up virtual tools. Layer change nothing, retraction nothing, tool change nothing, end script, whatever you want. You want to make sure that it does something to move away from the print, otherwise it's just going to sit there when it finishes and make a big blob on the top of the print you just finished. So pretty basic. Speeds, for what we're going to do today, just about anything is going to work fine. 50 millimeters a second default. Outline, 40% of that, so the outline is going to print at 20 millimeters per second. Infill, I almost always leave at 80. Movement speed, generally you want that at least 80 millimeters a second. 100 to 150 will work well with the G-Tech machines as long as you have your acceleration and jerk set to 1010. Adjust printing speeds for layers below X number of seconds. This is for really small parts, or if you have something that comes to a point you want to print a little slower. I just leave it around 4. I just don't even bother with it until I'm printing a part that I think is going to need it. Other bridging model we're doing today doesn't have any bridging. Make sure your filament properties set 1.75. That would be the only thing here that is necessary to change. Tool change retraction distance. I think in the model we're doing today this doesn't matter, but you always want to make sure this is set as same as your normal retraction. The default is somewhere around 12 millimeters and about 10 millimeters a second. That's what makes a big blob on your prime tower, and then your prime tower gets knocked over or you end up skipping steps because of it. So keep that the same. It also helps avoid clogs. And then advanced, let's see, we're not going to change any of this today. I generally use allow single, we don't want that, we want perimeters only. I usually use allow single extrusion fill because that gives you the option to print at a wider extrusion on the inside, so it saves having to do infill for very small areas. And over here, sometimes I have minimum travel set because it's a lot of times if you're only moving a few millimeters and it's inside an object or on a printed area, you really don't need a retraction. I sometimes change these for this model. I'm going to leave it. Movement behavior, when I'm doing vases, and even if they're in vase mode, sometimes it tries to cross to fill in a little area before it continues, and it leaves strings between the segments. So I usually set this pretty high. I'll let it travel across an already printed area before I'll let it cross the outline if possible. Slicing behavior just on heel. Okay, so we've got pretty much everything. We'll just update it. So now what we're going to do is go load our models. Okay, now that we have our profile all set up for our machine, in this case A10M, we need to have a model to print. I already went to Thingiverse and found a simple thing, a 2-color traffic cone. So we'll import those. STLs. There we go. And you can see they come out sitting like this. That's okay. We'll group them together in a moment. So what we want to do is we want to add another process. And as you can see, the settings are all the same as from our first profile process that we set up. So what we're going to do now is we have to associate a process with a part to print. So we come down here to select models, and let's see, I want to print the orange part, or I'll probably print red because I don't have any orange. Or I could make orange, I suppose, but that's for another video. So we want to select the part we want to print with process 1, hit OK. On process 2, do the same thing. And we'll print the rings with process 2, and OK. So we're all set. You can see these are already both selected. Sorry about that. But what we'll want to do is come up to Edit, select all, edit again, align selected model origins. This is going to put it together. Yes, just the way it should. So we see now, we select process 1, highlighted in yellow is everything that's going to print with process 1. Highlighted in yellow now, everything that's going to print in process 2. But we're not out of the woods yet. We actually have to tell each process what color to use. So go to process 1, which is the left extruder we're going to use. You don't have to select it here. It doesn't matter at this point. We go to layer, and we want to print the base part with our left extruder. We want the brim. I always leave that on left. Sometimes you might want to change it to another one, but I always leave it on left. Infill, we want to make sure our infill is set for the same extruder, the same color, because we don't need it switching extruders just to print the infill. Support, we don't have any, but same thing here. You'd have to select which extruder to print your support in. Everything else is still already set up, so we're done there. Go to process 2. Now we're going to do the same thing, and you see it still says left. We want to change this to right, to use the right extruder. Again, I'm going to leave the skirt to the left because that's only the first layer. Infill, we want to change this to right. And again, no support. So now we're done. This is ready to slice and print. So prepare to print. We want to select all. So we print both processes. Continuous printing. Select OK. So there's our sliced model. You can see I've got coloring over here in preview. Select active tool head. And that'll show us what model is printed, which part of the model. Anything in blue is going to print with tool 0 or E0. Anything in green is going to print in with tool 1. Sorry. Okay, so that's all sliced, ready to print. I usually do take a quick check, go down through the layers, make sure there's no weirdness happening. I can see that the walls are thin enough. There is no actual infill except for this part of the base here. So it looks like everything's okay and it's ready to print. I will, I could print this and show you that it actually works, but I'm pretty confident it would. Maybe I'll tack a picture or something onto the end later. I believe we've covered it for this one. In the next one, I'll show you how to take a single color, like if you can't find a model but you just want to change it, make it striped. In the next video, I'll show you how to use tools here in Simplify 3D that can do that. And another upcoming video would be printing this in 3 or more colors with some virtual tools and mixing. Hope this works out for you. Hope it explains a little bit of the process of setting this all up, because I know it's confusing, but once you understand the workflow, how it uses the processes, and how you can select each color or each extruder to print certain parts, you'll be well on your way to multicolor printing fairly quickly and easily. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.